Page 365. Good morning. Pledge. I, the undersigned, pledge to report to the camp security officer any escape planned by prisoners. But we were talking only about the thieves, and who escapes except the thieves, and how am I going to write the word thieves in an official document? That's slang. It makes sense just as it is. But the entire meaning is changed. No, now I see that you are not one of us, and that it is necessary to talk to you in an entirely different way, and not here. Oh, what fearsome words, not here. When there is a blizzard outside the window, when you are a trustee and live in a friendly chamber of monstrosities. Where is that not here? In La Portava? And what does it mean in an entirely different way? Anyway, in the last analysis, there hadn't been a single escape during my time in this camp. It was about as likely as a meteorite falling. And if there were going to be escapes, what fool would talk about them ahead of time? And that meant I would never know, and that meant there would be nothing for me to report. In the last analysis, this wasn't a bad way out of it, but couldn't we really get along without that paper? That's the system. I sighed. I reassured myself with the unspoken qualifications and put my signature down, selling my soul. Selling my soul to save my body. All done? Can I go? Oh, not at all. There was also one on non-disclosure, but further up, the same piece of paper. You must choose a pseudonym for yourself. A pseudonym? Ah, you mean a conspiratorial nickname? Yes, of course. All informers have to have their conspiratorial nickname. Good Lord, how swiftly I had fallen. He had outplayed me after all. The chessman had moved, and it was checkmate. And all my imagination fled, and my mind went blank. I can always find names for dozens of heroes. Now I couldn't think up even one little nickname. Mirthfully he suggested to me, well, what about Ch12? And finally I wrote, at the end of the pledge, Ch12. Those 6 letters are branded in shameful grooves on my memory. After all, I had wanted to die among human beings. I had been prepared to die among human beings. How it turned out that I had remained to live among Kurds. And the commissioner tucked my pledge away in the safe. This was his output for the night shift, and he courteously explained to me that I must not come to his office, that this would cause suspicion. The jailer, Sinin, was a trustworthy person, and all my reports, denunciations, could be transmitted secretly through Sinin. That's how birds are snared, beginning with the tiny little claw. That particular year, I probably wouldn't have been able to stop myself at that edge. After all, if you can't hold on to the mane, you'll not be able to hold on to the tail either. Once you start sliding down, you'll slide down further. But something helped me to hold back. Whenever I met Sinin, he urged me on. Well, I used to spread my hands. I heard nothing. I was regarded with hostility by the thieves, and was unable to get close to them. And then, as if out of spite, although there had been no escapes at all of a sudden, a lousy thief escaped from our camp. All right then, report on something else, on the brigade, on the room, Sinin insisted. I kept insisting that I hadn't promised to report on anything else. By now it was already getting towards spring. Nonetheless, I gained a little by giving too narrow a pledge. And at this point I was jerked out of the camp and into a shrashka on special orders from the ministry. And that's how I got by. Never again did I have to sign as Ch12. But even today, I shudder when I encounter that name. Oh, how difficult it is to become a human being. Even if you have survived the front and bombing and been blown up by landmines, that's still only the very beginning of heroism. That is still not the whole thing. Many years passed. I had been in Sharashkas and special camps. I bore myself independently, even more impotently, and never again did the security section spoil me with its good offices, and I grew used to living with the gay conviction that on my case file they had stamped "Do not recruit." I was sent into exile. I lived there for nearly 3 years. The dispersal of the exiles had already begun too, and several of the exiled nationalities had already been liberated. By this time, those of us who remained used to joke that when we went to report in at the commander's headquarters, the 20th Congress had also passed, and everything seemed gone once and for all. I made jolly plans for my return to European Russia as soon as I was released. And suddenly, when I was leaving the school courtyard one day, a well-dressed Kazakh in civilian clothes greeted me by name and patronymic, and hurried over to shake my hand. "Let's go and talk," he nodded amiably in the direction of the commandant's headquarters. "I have to have my lunch," I waved him away. "And you will be free later this evening?" "I won't be free this evening either. In my free evenings I was writing a novel." "Well, when will you be free? Tomorrow?" He had caught me, and I had to fix an appointment for the next day. I thought he would have something to say about my case being reconsidered. Just before this I had made a mistake. I had written a petition to the higher-ups, just like the orthodox communists, which meant I got myself into the situation of a petitioner. That was something the state security couldn't let by. But the province security officer had triumphantly taken over the office of the district MPD chief, had locked the door, and was clearly preparing for a conversation that was to last many hours, and that was rendered all the more complicated by the fact he didn't speak Russian very well. Despite this, by the end of the first hour, I realized that he was interested not in reconsideration of my case, but in recruiting me as an informer. Evidently, with the release of a section of their exiles, the ranks of the informers had grown sparse. I found all this both ridiculous and vexing because I regarded each half hour as very precious, and ridiculous because in March 1956, this kind of conversation grated on me with its bad timing like the clumsy scraping of a knife across a plate. Very gently, I tried to explain this untimeliness to him, but he would have none of it. Like a serious bulldog, he tried not to let up on his grip. Every sort of relaxation in the Soviet Union always reaches the provinces after a delay of 3, 5, or 10 years. And it is only tightening up which is instantaneous. He hadn't the slightest idea of what 1956 was to be like. Then I reminded him that the MGB had been abolished, and he had eagerly and happily demonstrated to me that the KGB was exactly the same thing, with the same personnel and the same tasks. But by that year I had already developed some sort of cavalier carelessness towards their glorious institution. I felt that it would be quite in the spirit of the epoch to send him exactly where he and his colleagues deserved. I feared no direct consequences for myself. They couldn't happen during that glorious year, and it would have been great fun simply to leave, slamming the door behind me. But I stopped to think first. What about my manuscripts? For whole days at a time they lay there in my tiny hut, protected only by a weak little lock. Yes, and concealed on the inside with an additional small ruse. At night I would get them out and right away. If I were to enrage the KGB, they would look for a chance of revenge, something compromising, and they might just find my manuscripts. No, I simply had to bring this to an end peaceably. Oh, my country, oh my accursed country. Where is it in the freest months the human being? Where, in its very freest months, the human being most inwardly free could not permit himself to antagonize the gendarme. He could not fling in their faces everything he thought. I am gravely ill, that's the problem. My illness doesn't allow me to look around and snoop. I have enough troubles. Let's leave it at that. Of course, this was a pitiful way of getting out of it, because I was recognizing their actual right to recruit. And what I should have done was to ridicule and deny that right. It was a refusal on my knees. And he still didn't accept it, the smart aleck. For half an hour more, he kept trying to prove to me that even a gravely ill person ought to collaborate. But when he saw that I was totally immovable, he took another track. Do you have an extra certificate? What kind? Certifying that you are so ill. Yes, I have a certificate. Then bring it to me. Yes, he had to have his output too for his own workday. Justification that I had been correctly selected as a candidate, but that they had not known that this person was gravely ill. The certificate was required not merely for him to read, but also to be stapled on the case file, and thereby to end the whole attempt. I gave him the document, and with that, we were quits. Those were the freest months in our country in a whole half-century. And what about the person who had no medical excuse? The skill of the security officer consisted in immediately picking the right master key. In one of the Siberian camps, a native of one of the Baltic countries, who knew Russian well, which was why the choice fell on him, was summoned to the chief, and there in the chief's office sat an unfamiliar captain with an aquiline nose and the hypnotic gaze of a cobra. Shut the door tight, he warned very gravely, as if enemies were about to burst in without lowering his burning eyes, which stared at you from beneath shaggy brows, and inside you everything wilted, something burned and suffocated him. Before summoning you, of course, the captain had gathered all the information available about him, and without even having seen him, had determined that keys 1, 2, 3, and 4 would all be to no avail. So here, only the last and the strongest key could be used, but he kept staring for several minutes into Yu's unclouded, defenseless eyes, checking him out with its own eye, and at the same time depriving him of its willpower, and already invisibly raising him above that which would immediately descend upon him. The security chief took time for only the briefest introduction, speaking not in the tone of an abstract political catechism, but tensely, as if something more were about to explode today or tomorrow right there in their own camp. Do you know the world is divided into two camps, and one will be defeated, and we know very well which it'll be. Do you know which? So that is how it is. If you want to survive, you must break away from the doomed capitalist shore and swim across to the new shore. Are you familiar with the nastiest to the new shore? And he added a few more such phrases, and did not for a moment lower his hot, threatening gaze. And having finally confirmed in his own mind the number of the key, he then asked with alarmed seriousness, "And what about your family?" And one by one, without ceremony, he reeled off their names, all their names. And he knew the ages of the children too. That meant he had already familiarized himself with the family. That was very serious. You understand, of course, he pronounced hypnotically. You and your family are a single whole. If you make a mistake and perish, your family will immediately perish too. We do not permit the families of traitors. His voice grew more meaningful. To go on living in a healthy Soviet environment. So make your choice between the two worlds, between life and death. I am offering you an opportunity to pledge to assist the security section. In case you refuse, your entire family will be immediately imprisoned in camp. In our hands, we have full power, Howard was, and we are not accustomed to backtrack on our decisions. Once again, he was right. Since we have chosen you, you will work with us. All this was loosed suddenly on Yu's head. He was not prepared for it. He would have never thought of it. He had considered that only scoundrels became informers, but that they might approach him, a blow direct, without waste motion, approach him without the cushion of time. And the captain was waiting for his answer. It was about to explode right then, and then everything would explode. And you took thought. What is really impossible for them? When have they ever spared anyone's family? They didn't hesitate to liquidate the GULag families right down to tiny children, and they even wrote about it proudly in the newspapers. You had also seen the work of the organs in 1940 and 1941 in the Baltic states, and had gone to the prison yards to look at the pile of executed prisoners during the Soviet retreat. And in 1944, they had heard the Baltic broadcasts from Leningrad. Like the captain's gaze at this moment, they had been full of threats and had breathed revenge. They promised reprisals against every last person who had aided the enemy. And so it was, there to compel them to show mercy now. And so what was there? To ask for it was useless. It was necessary to choose. But here is what you, himself a victim of the myth of the organs, did not yet realize. That machine possessed no such magnificent coordination and interlinked responsiveness, and would ensure that what he refused today to become an informer in a Siberian camp, his family would be hauled off to Siberia in a week's time. And there was one more thing he didn't realize either. No matter how poor his opinions of the organ, they were even worse. They were even worse than he thought. The hour would soon strike when all these families, all these hundreds of thousands of families, would troop off into common exile, where they would perish without any reference for how fathers were behaving in camp. Fear for himself would not have shaken him, but you pictured his wife and daughter in camp conditions, in these same barracks where lechery wasn't even curtained off, and where there was no defense whatever for any woman under 60. And he shuddered. The correct key had been picked. None other would have opened the door, but this one did. But he still dragged things out a bit. I have to think it over. All right, think it over for 3 days, but don't talk it over with even a single person. You will be shot for disclosure. And you goes to get advice from a fellow national, the very same, in fact, against whom he is being told to write his first denunciation, and in fact, they edit it together, for this friend admits it is impossible to risk his family. On his second visit to the captain, you signs the devil's receipt and receives his assignment and his contact. He is not to go to the office anymore. He is to conduct all his business through the unconvoyed trustee Frau Ryabinin. This is an important constituent of the work of the camp security chief. These residents are scattered throughout the camp. Frau Ryabinin is the most vociferous of all. Among the people, a prankster. Frau Ryabinin is a popular personality. Frau Ryabinin has some sort of under-the-counter work or other, and a separate cabin of his own, and always has money. With the security chief's help, he has gotten into the depths and currents of camp life, and he hovers in them, comfortably at home. Such residents as he are the cables on which the whole network hangs. Vol Ryabinin instructs you that he must transmit his reports in a dark nook. In our work, the main thing is conspiracy. He summons him to his private quarters. The captain is dissatisfied with your report. You have to write so that there's material against a person. I'm going to teach you how. And the stinking snoot teaches the wan, depressed intellectual you how to write filth against people. But Yu's downcast look leads Ryabinin to his own conclusion. It is necessary to liven this ninny up, to heat him up a little. And he says to him in a friendly way, "Listen, your life is a hard one. You sometimes want to buy something to add to your bread ration. The captain wants to help you. Here, take this." And he takes a 50-ruble bill from his billfold. And this is the captain, and that is how free of auditors they are. And maybe they are the only ones in the whole country. And he shoves it at you. And suddenly, at the sight of this pale green toad, which has been pushed into his hands, all the spells cast by the Cobra captain, all the hypnosis, all the constraint, even all the fear for his family, all that has taken place, its entire meaning, is objectified in this loathsome bill with its greenish phlegm, these commonplace Judas silver pieces. And without even stopping to think what will happen to his family, with the natural gesture of warding off filth, Yu pushes away the 50-ruble bill, and the uncomprehending Ryabinin shoves it at him again, and Yu throws it on the floor and gets up, already relieved, already free both of the moral teachings of Ryabinin and of his signature given to the captain, free of those paper conditions in the face of the great duty of a human being. He leaves without asking permission. He walks through the camp compound on light as air. I am free. I am free. Well, not entirely so. A stupid security chief would have kept on hauling him in. But the Cobra captain understood that the stupid Ryabinin had spoiled the threading, had used the wrong key, and the pincers no longer sought out you in that camp, and Ryabinin would pass him without greeting. You calmed down and was glad. And at this point they began to send all the 58s off to special camps, and he was sent to Steplag. And he thought that this prisoner transport would break the chain all the more. But not at all. A notation evidently remained in his file. At his new place, Yu was summoned to a colonel. They tell me you agreed to work with us, but that you do not deserve our trust. Perhaps they didn't explain it to you clearly. However, this colonel inspired no fear in you, and in addition, Yu's family, like the families of many of the inhabitants of the Baltic states, had been resettled in Siberia by this time. There was no doubt about it. He had to get them off his back. But what pretext could he use? The colonel turned him over to a lieutenant for the latter to work him over. And this lieutenant jumped up and down and threatened and promised while Yu kept trying to find a way of forcefully and decisively turning them down. Though he was an enlightened and irreligious person, Yu discovered that the only forced defense against them was to hide behind Christ. This was not very honest, but it was a sure thing. He lied. I must tell you frankly that I had a Christian upbringing, and therefore it is quite impossible for me to work with you. And that ended it, and all the lieutenant's chatter, which had by then lasted many hours, simply stopped. The lieutenant understood. He had drawn a bad number. "We need you like a dog needs 5 legs," he exclaimed petulantly. "Give me a written refusal," once again written, "and write just that, explaining about your damned God." Apparently, they have to close the case of every informer with a separate piece of paper, just as they open it with one. The reference to Christ satisfied the lieutenant completely. None of the security officers would accuse him subsequently of failing to use every effort he could. And does the impartial reader not find that they flee from Christ like devils from the sign of a cross, from the bells calling to matins? And that is why our Soviet regime can never come to terms with Christianity, and the French communists' promises to the contrary mean nothing. Intense. Thank you for listening. Have a good day.